just wanted to pay tribute to everybody who's come out today and pay tribute to people that have been in this movement for a long, long time that have given to the wonderful Palestinian partners. So I want to acknowledge those people before I start. I've been asked to speak a little bit about my journey into Palestinian activism, so I'll try and be fairly quick, so I'm not taking too much time up. I think my first introduction to Palestine was watching a little bit of the news coverage of the Camp David Accords in 1978 as a very young child, when Begin and Sadat were arguing over Palestine without the Palestinians being involved in the Camp David Accords. And then a little bit later, probably at age 19, I was a factory worker and a labourer. I left school at a young age, but I was a reader. I was reading George Jackson and Malcolm X, and they were alluding to Palestine when I was a young man. I didn't know what they were talking about, but there was solidarity there for Palestine. And I was deeply engaged with the black liberation struggle as a young Pacific, Māori, Pākehā person. So I took those guys seriously when they were actually talking about Palestine. A little bit later on, my deeper introduction to Palestine came when I started engaging with Edward Wadi Said's work as a student at university, and saw the struggle and saw the disposition, and when he talked about the diaspora of the Palestinian people and the suffering and the loss and the murder and everything that had happened in Gaza and in the West Bank, but also in the diaspora as well. And I was very moved by that. I used some of his work in my PhD thesis because I wanted to bring Palestine into my own work and bring Edward into my own work. I was also an activist. I used to spend 6 months activism as a PhD student and 6 months writing 100,000 words for my supervisor every year. I gave him 100,000 words every year because I loved them, but I also loved my PhD on Bob Marley. But 6 months went to activism. So what I used to do is I used to be around the student activist scene, involved in a lot of activism there. And I met Palestinian activists in my student activism there. One was a PhD student from the University of Waikato. I think he was from the West Bank, and he told me what was going on in Palestine, so that was a further education for me. Fast forward to 2013, a very dear friend of mine who I used to be involved with socialist workers with, Roger Fala, was heavily involved in Palestine work. I started attending the rallies, not as an organizer, but just as somebody in the background. Started going to the rallies, started making financial contributions quietly as by way of giving to the cause. I went to Vito Pellet's speaking tour when he spoke in Auckland and bought his book. He was a wonderful Israeli Jew who has stood fast with the Palestinian people, so it was an honour to listen to him. And I would go on occasions up to the Palestine rallies up at the PSNA ones who were organised up at Algiers Square. But I want to emphasise, I wasn't a frontline activist at the time. I was somebody that was just going along, quietly financially supporting occasionally, being there for my friend Roger Fowler and his wonderful family, but also to be there for the Palestinian people, hold a flag up. And I was in the middle of a lot of Pacific activism at the time, Māori activism, support work. So Palestine wasn't a central focus for me in those years, up until 2023. In 2023, we saw what happened in Gaza, and I could see that my Palestinian brothers and sisters were in the middle of an emergency, so I needed to get involved more heavily. So I've done that through two organisations that work here. They go along and support. We do work here, but there's other work we do to support the Palestinian cause and graft through the hard yards, through the quiet yards behind the scenes to support Anafi. The other thing I do, this is the last thing, second to last thing I'll say, the other thing I do is I do work for the Pacific. So I organise in the Pacific community around places like Kanaki, West Papua. I'm a member of West Papua Community Action. And what we do is we support our Pacific brothers that are actually facing colonisation. In West Papua, they're facing genocide. And it's a similar process with our wonderful Palestinian partner here. So what I've tried to do as an organiser is actually bring Palestine into my organising. So what I do, when I organise speaking events with other wonderful people on Kanaki or West Papua, what we do is we bring a Palestinian speaker into those events. We welcome him as a brother and sister in our events. We invite them to speak, and we say, you have a place alongside the Moana to speak about your issues here in our work. So we're not just speaking to our Pacific communities about Pacific community issues. We're bringing Palestine into the Pacific organising, which I do. And every single organiser I've worked with on the Pacific front has applauded that kaupapa of bringing Palestine into that work. So we're looking to extend Palestine out into the Pacific community. That's some of the work I've been doing outside of the kaiapena work and the other work I do. The last thing I just wanted to say is that we are very aware, I come from a colonised people, we're very aware of our Palestine brothers and sisters, that nobody endures the pain they endure. Nobody endures the pain that they endure as Palestinian people, because that is a terrible tragedy that's happened to them, but it's theirs alone. But what we can do is we, as Pacific people, from colonised people, is we can stand alongside our Palestinian whānau. We can open spaces for our Palestinian whānau. We can show solidarity and love to our Palestinian whānau without asking them to help us. That's the basis of Pacific solidarity. I want to say to people here, if you love the Palestinian people, and it's a challenge I say to everybody here before I finish, find ways of including Palestinian whānau in your activities, whether it's community events, family events, activism. Find a way to bring them in, find a way to let them speak on their own terms. Palestinians speak for Palestinians, we open space for them. So, kia manuia to everybody, and I want to say, the most important person in the movement is the individual that's come for the first time. The least important person is the most important person, because that's the movement building. It's not people like me. I'm nothing in the movement. What matters is the people in the movement and the wider movement. So, manuia, and many blessings. Thank you for coming out and supporting Palestine. Free, free Palestine! Free, free!